Mark, one of the things that we have heard a lot from Congress on is that they're well aware of AI. They know AI exists. They know they should have a thought or two on it. But is Congress going to be the silver bullet here for some of these challenges that we see with AI?
I think probably no and yes. And what I mean by that is no, they're not going to be the instigator, I don't think, of the proper framework for getting this done. But I do think they have an important role as the resourcer. If you look at the executive order, I know it's been broken down a little bit. It'll be broken down some more today. There's a lot of tasking in there for federal agencies. One thing about an executive order is it, in fact, does not come with any money. And one might say that on occasion, executive orders that have no money don't necessarily achieve the results intended. In that sense, they're even harder than national security memorandums, which I do think tend to get resourced by the directed agency. So with this executive order, I really worry, first of all, about NIST. It's given some tough assignments, and I know we'll go through that a little bit in a future discussion, but they the National Institute of Standards and Technology at Department of Commerce has already been tasked repeatedly, I think intelligently, by this administration with some cybersecurity executive orders, and now with the artificial intelligence executive order. But the division, I think, that'll do this work has been, reasonably underfunded. Our recommendation in the Solarium Commission was that you increase the cybersecurity division's budget by about 75%. From its fiscal year 22 levels at that point. What we've seen are very small administration requests for increases that Congress has increased very slightly.
They're also trying to put guardrails in place. We do have some bills, at least that are spoken about and that are being drafted.
So, I mean, what's crazy here is I look back, there's 43 different bills this legislative cycle, in other words, in the last 8 months, on artificial intelligence to the House and the Senate. Now, I should say only 18 of those are like artificial intelligence as the only thing in it. And then artificial intelligence is included in 25 other bills that some have to do with safety and privacy, kids protection, things like that, but with big artificial intelligence roles. So there's no lack of actual legislation being written. What there probably is an actual lack of legislation that could meaningfully define these guardrails for us right now. So I think it's going to take a little bit of time. In fact, one thing that was crazy, there was a 1-2 week period where 9 bills were dropped, 6 in the Senate, 3 in the House. And I mean, at that point, you just kind of wonder who's writing these. I mean, when you think about how much artificial expertise there is on the Hill, how much artificial intelligence expertise there is, how did they produce 9 bills in like 2 weeks? The 3 people. I mean, I'm being a little facetious there, but it's a worry for me that kind of throwing like the kitchen sink at this is in fact, not helpful. So we'll have to see. I'm relying a lot on Senator Schumer and Representative Senator Warner, Senator Young, a few of the people, Senator Rounds, who are working in an AI group in the Senate to come up with something. I think that's the most likely source. But again, I don't think the Senate, the Congress is the place I'd look for the guardrails. Congress is the place I look for the resources. And should there be like a very significant national security negative, something that has to be addressed, and it's initially done through executive order or presidential decision or directive, it then gets backed up by a law change to allow it to survive judicial, consideration or review. So again, with these 43 bills out there, do I think some of them will pass and eventually get attached to other pieces of legislation and become law? Yes. Do I think any of them that are currently out there are the Rosetta Stone for the guardrails we need? No. So we have a little bit more work to go.
So just as for all of us that are Hill watchers, is there anything coming up that you think has legs in the next, before the end of this term? I mean, or do we think we're looking something more in the next Congress?
There are a few artificial intelligence, but generally DoD specific in the National Defense Authorization Act, which I think will pass before the holidays, but I could definitely be wrong on that. I think that's all I plan on seeing happen this calendar year.
Well, and what a lot of Congress does, we don't like to admit this openly, is very reactive. And what we have seen, which is not really dead to rights on AI, but in the cyber arena, we've seen attributed Iranian attacks on the water circuit, on critical infrastructure. Knowing that I've got you here from the Solarium, Do you think we'll see something as a reaction to that? And do you think we're any better off with the rewriting they're doing of PPD 21 to try and address some of these things?
So I'll break it up and first say, as I said at the very beginning today, when we kicked this off, I do think it's time for us to take some cost imposition action in cyberspace against the Iranian IRGC kind of sponsored hacker groups, much like we did in 2016, 2018, 2020 against IRA and Russian Business Network, two Russian activist groups there, or in one case, more like a contractor for the government. The reason I think we need to do that, and I think it's okay, we reserve the right to respond to cyber with both cyber and kinetic. I think this is the proper place for a cyber response. And also, I just think it's to knock them down a little bit and make sure they understand that we don't appreciate what they're doing. We don't want them to come back. I think doing nothing sends the wrong signal. On the more policy side, look, we've always known that in critical infrastructure, there are haves and have-nots. The haves are the defense industrial base, financial services, energy, telecom. They have a mix of a good sector risk management agency, particularly the DIB with the Department of Defense and NSA and Rob Joyce's team at ICC that are really good. Resources, think about financial services, the big banks particularly, or regulation, like in the case of energy, and then telecom, a good relationship with DoD as well, and then in the intelligence community. So I think those are haves. The have-nots, which pretty much is, some degree everyone else. There's a lot of sectors in there. The ones that really worried us in the Solarium Commission were water, healthcare, food, NAG, and then some of the military mobility, particularly ports. And so here we see water hit. There's in most of these facilities, a poor level of cyber hygiene, not good password management, not good multi-factor authentication, not good protection of operational technology devices in their exposure to the internet. We absolutely need to get a better process going for both the performance of the government as sector risk management agency. In the case of water, the EPA, which still has about 4 or 5 people in cybersecurity supporting 55,000 utilities. That is not a balanced attack. That's basically website management is all they can do. And then I think so first we need to get the funding there, the SRMA, the appropriations, and then we need to recognize that some of these places are not ready for regulation. Water is one of them. They need some kind of joint public-private partnership to get at that, some kind of like third-party assessment organization that comes in to a standard maybe set by the EPA. And there's legislation for that percolating around. Final thing I'll say is on PPD 21, I'm still, obviously it's not going to get out this calendar year. I think that was always probably not true. It's now going to be 2 or 3 years, 2 years late for this administration, 8 or 9 years late in reality. PPD 21 was written in 2013, March 2013, should have been rewritten in 2016 or 2017, the latest. It's going to be 2024. It's going to be 6, 7 years late. And I'm really afraid if we're not careful, they're going to rush it. And they're not going to, and while they'll do important things like acknowledge CISA and the National Cyber Director, new things that don't exist in the current PPD 21, they won't do the really hard work, which is determine what are our proper national critical infrastructures. And in the case of what I really think they need to add, one of them, Frank Salifo, in the last panel, he and I have written pretty extensively on space support systems as a critical infrastructure. And then the big one, the cloud. And even Brad Smith, president of Microsoft, recently blogged that, cloud is a critical infrastructure. If you read the AI executive order, cloud is a critical infrastructure. I mean, they don't say it in there, but they say everything but that and imply the importance of it. We really need to have someone who's in charge of that. We just don't have that kind of responsibility inside the federal government, that you're the one who works with these 4 or 5 big companies and then the smaller versions of MSPs and ISSPs to make sure we have the right level of standards of security in the cloud. That's going to be even more important as generative AI, because it does this data collection, this testing. Having good security in the cloud is going to be a requirement to a degree which it isn't right now. So from my point of view, that there's a lot of work to be done, mostly in the executive branch here, but then some appropriations from Congress again on the sector risk management agencies.
Thank you so much, Mark. We'll have some follow-up conversation with some folks from the executive branch on the EO later, and really thank you for your wisdom here. This has been great.